Hello, good morning. My name is Vickie Howard, and I'm from Harold Whitaker Middle School in McGoffin County. One of the things that you may have heard about Harold Whitaker Middle School, we're over it now, but I just want to give it as a little background, is that we were the school that was blown away by the tornado in 2012. But that is one of the reasons that I did this grant. We've not had a science lab since then, so this grant allowed us to do some of that. Now, my question is, how do you provide equal opportunity learning for every student in your classroom? I'm a traditional science teacher. I teach in a traditional 7th grade or an 8th grade science class. But every one of my classes at the school have somewhere between 8 and 9 exceptional students. When I came in this year, I had an exceptional student that was autistic. I had never had anyone like him before, and my first question was, what do I do? How do I provide opportunities for him? And I started thinking about some of the things that I could do that would allow him to learn along with the rest of the students. And I noticed that the rest of my exceptional students and my traditional students all had the same problems. They're 7th graders, they're 8th graders. They need to learn how to be social in a correct way. I had just gone to a Kagan training in July. Now, Kagan is a specialized form of cooperative learning. Now, I've done cooperative learning in the past, put a group together and give them instructions and have them do the work. And the one thing that you notice right off the bat is there's one kid that kind of looks like it's a little overworked. Some of them look like they're really relaxed, too relaxed. Well, Kagan cured that problem because it required every student, including my exceptional students, to assume a role, complete their role before the next student could start on theirs. So it eliminated problems. I'm not touching this and it's just flying through. And Kagan encourages students to work together. As you see here, a lot of those students are working on things. They each have a role, they each have to do it. Hogs and logs. The hog was the poor kid who got stuck with all the work. The log is the kids who managed to hide within that cooperative learning. They no longer do that. As they go through, they have things that they can do. One of the strategies is that they go around and find someone who knows. Someone who knows can be a fun activity, or it can be a review activity, or even a form of coaching for students to find someone who knows the answer if they don't. Those things work really well. During the first day of school, as I said, we had problems. By the time October came around, my students had learned rather well how to socialize with each other for a specific purpose. They had also learned that they had to participate. There's no place to hide in a cooperative learning group if you do it. In the month of January, I had a student who had a couple of meltdowns. He had to get reassociated with the social skills that he had learned with Kagan. But since January, that same student has been the one that's telling other kids, don't do that. Don't do that bad behavior. 27 out of 29 of my students in the classroom, when they were surveyed, agreed that Kagan structures have been helpful in improving behavior and academic performance. Now, it can be any cooperative learning skill. The indicators of pre-test scores and post-collaborative learning indicated an improved score on an average of 3 to 5% for a lot of those exceptional students. But guys, the really, really big part of this, it's not so much qualitative data that you're going to get, because, I mean, that's not enough of an improvement to really be able to point to Kagan and the labs and things and say, that's the reason. But it happens. And I think as much as anything, it happens because you have the Kagan structures. It takes more than a year, I think, to see the true results in a Kagan classroom. You have in my class, I had a disproportionate number of exceptional students compared to the top performers in the classroom. And because I did have that, I had to change up Kagan a little bit. The grant allowed students to do things with Kagan that they couldn't do before. I also bought lab equipment. It wasn't expensive lab equipment. It was mostly glassware, so that children could learn how to do precise measurements. They were able to use some computers. We're not one-to-one. This is computers that they used on a everyday basis. Now, in the first picture over here, what in the world is that in the floor? It's toilet paper. This is a pre-grant lab activity. Students used toilet paper as a measurement of long distances when we were talking about space. Now, the really cool part, those kids back there, those are some of my exceptional students that the first day they walked into my room said, learning is hard work. I don't do work. The big splurge that we did was a wireless microscope. My little boy that was autistic, he refused to get anywhere near a microscope. So we bought this thing. It's a wireless microscope. It goes wherever they need to go. He doesn't have to touch it. He has an iPad that he uses. It's part of his IEP. So what we did is we bought this thing, and I know I'm far behind my thing, but I'm going to tell you all about it anyway. My timing would have been off. Well, anyway, you use this. He used this. He wouldn't go near a microscope, but he saw everything that every other student in my class saw because he had this. The great part about it is it also works for you as a teacher. It'll take pictures. You can broadcast it up on the screen, anything that you need to do. Now, we went to labs every week. You saw in there some pictures where the little girl had the overflow. That's a post-grant purchase. She actually learned the hard way. You do have to have precise measurements or you can have accidents. And that's a really good thing about what we did with all of this. Guys, when I say Kagan structures, that's just one form out there. That's one form. And it works. Qualitatively, I can tell you it works. It worked for it worked for the kids in my classroom. Did I follow the closely structured plan of Kagan? No, I didn't. I had to adapt it to my classroom. And if you're going to try to use this kind of thing with your classroom, if you're going to try to use cooperative learning, there's two things I'm going to tell you. One, make sure you give every student a role. Make sure that student finishes his or her role before it goes on to the next student in the group. Now, Kagan, it says change up your groups every 6 weeks. It doesn't always work. One of the things that I found is I had to change my groups differently than Kagan said to accommodate my classroom and the needs of my classroom. So I always think about the needs of your classroom before you do this cooperative learning. Otherwise, it's going to be the same epic fail that I realized that I was having with cooperative learning before I went to the Kagan training, because there were those hogs and there were those logs in every group. Now, one of my most successful things, or to me it is, I had an exceptional student in my classroom, and this is another, this was not a autistic student. He was just an exceptional student. This student never, ever spoke in my classroom. You never, ever got a response out of him. A few weeks ago, we were doing a little discussion and questions and answers back and forth and things, and all of a sudden I see this little hand go up. And when I called on him, he had the answer. We celebrated. One of the things that we do in the class is we celebrate the successes, no matter how small they are, no matter how large they are. We celebrate them. We celebrated his success. And the next time I asked a question, he didn't even bother raising his hand. That answer was out of his mouth, and he was on a roll. I actually let him be a hog. He dominated the class. But it made a world of difference in him. And that's what I'm looking for, is the equal learning opportunities. And the lab work, obviously. We all know that the research says that you should have lab work in these classes. In GSS says inquiry. No better way to do inquiry than with lab work. And those kids, my little kid that I bought this microscope for, a couple of weeks ago, we went to the lab. Of course, we did an egg drop. If anybody in here is in science, you know that we're doing through course task assessments, and right now we're doing physics, and an egg drop is one of them. My exceptional students, every one of them worked in lab, they worked in their groups, and they created egg drops. And I can say they were successful with them. And that's, I can't convey to you how happy I am with the way my students are doing, because I see equal learning opportunities. My other traditional students aren't having to come in and carry the load in the cooperative learning. My exceptional students aren't turning around and trying to find places to hide. And it's all because they get to put their hands on something in a lab. They get to see what happens when it doesn't work out the way they want it to. And they get to redo. And that's the part that I just can't tell you how happy I am. Now, it flipped through really fast. I don't know what happened to it. But it flipped through really fast. I must have been gripping too hard or something. And this would be one of the times, if you were students in my classroom, every one of you would be getting bonus points because you caught me making a mistake. Now, I did bring this with me, and I brought an iPad because I didn't know if any of you might want to look at it and kind of play around with it. So I actually, even though that went, at Mario Andretti speed, I actually did set it up to have a couple of minutes of time so that if you wanted to look at it and ask questions, that you would be able to do that. But I encourage all of you, go out there and find the ways to let your exceptional students and your traditional students work together, learn how to create the appropriate social bonds, and get on with it.